Hi Scorpio, welcome to your December 2018 love reading. It's Raina here, and I'm going to be doing the regular tarot spread portion with my Morgan Greer deck. That's the deck I use most often, and I have a new deck for the oracle cards. Now, I don't do oracle cards all the time, but I wanted to get oracle cards that have writing on the cards so that I can just pick a card and then just say it. I don't have to look in a booklet or something like that, because I think it takes away from the experience when you have to look at a booklet. And so that's wonderful. And this Whispers of Love deck actually has a booklet, but you don't need it. It has like a statement on the card itself. So that's nice. And I also got another deck that is for the general reading. So I'm looking forward to using that one as well, because I have been doing separate general tarot readings for the month and love readings. And that has worked out well for me, because then I can just focus on relationships in one reading. Or people who are looking for relationships, I should say, too. So, okay, I've been shuffling as I've been talking. And this'll... Okay. Whoa! The first three cards I got were Major Arcana cards, so... Oh, okay, 4. We'll see if it'll just keep going. Wow. Oops. And my cord came out here, and I got it, and I need it. I'm totally out of juice there. I'm just going to pick an additional card simply because the Seven of Cups is one of those cards that is very kind of nebulous in a way. Okay, wow. Well, the status of your love life as we go into the month of December, Scorpio, is the Hierophant card. This card connects to the sign of Taurus, if that means anything to you. And the Hierophant for love relationships, this can involve being concerned about marriage. So maybe you're dating somebody and you're saying, you know, I'd like to make it official. And usually I will say marriage or the equivalent, but in this particular case, to me, there's a strong sense of tradition with the Hierophant, or conforming to the dogma of a religion that says you have to be married, you can't live together, you know, things like that. So I would say it could be one of those situations where you're living with somebody, but you want to be in that, in a marriage. Or you are just single and you look around and you see your friends. You feel like a freak because you're in your mid-30s or you're 40 and you haven't gotten married. You know, that sense of wanting to conform to what you see around you, or what you've been told, conditioned to believe should be true. You know that some people, I know somebody personally who, I believe she was 40 and she got married, but she didn't stay married. I'm pretty sure she's divorced now. But it's like there's certain ages where people just, I think it's usually like 30 and 40. You know, if you're 40 and you haven't gotten married yet, you probably just say, forget about it, you know. You don't have the same sense of urgency, maybe. But maybe when you're 30 or 40, and especially if you're a woman, you're thinking about having a child, and maybe that's the first thing on your mind. I don't know. But yeah, sometimes people get very motivated during certain times of their life. This can also be like if you're married and you may be unhappy, but you feel like confined by this particular teaching that, you know, God hates divorce. And these kinds of things, I don't want to belittle somebody's beliefs, but I do not believe in that whatsoever, because I do feel that people change when they are in a relationship, and they may start with the same goals, but then they go in different directions and they're growing at different rates and they have different interests. And I don't think it's a sin to get out of that situation. However, I do think that especially if you have children, that you have to be very mindful that you can't just be like concerned about your own needs, that you have to think about what's best for everybody concerned. But that could just be going through your mind, all of this tradition. Will people think less of me? Will I be the oddball, the odd person out? Or I want to be in this traditional relationship. It could be either like wanting to kind of break away from that or wanting to go more into that. And there, some people, they want to get married because of, some kind of, they think they're going to do better financially. So it's not always romantic. I mean, they might just be pragmatic about it. But in this particular case, it might be due to some kind of a teaching that makes you think that it's the right thing to do, or you want to just you want to have children. Maybe you want to have that kind of traditional, relationship, and you want to start with getting married. You don't want to, have a child and then get married. I love the people that they have children together and then they say that they are engaged. And it's like it's like they're more afraid of getting married than they are of having a child with somebody, which I think that makes no sense to me, because having a child really is, that's something you can't undo. So marriage you can undo, and you can get out of, and you can get away from. So it's just kind of funny. I think there's just so much, a lot of it I think has to do with people's upbringing. If they saw their parents fighting or things like that, it can make them very afraid of attracting that kind of situation. This is the foundation card that may have led to this, the Hangman. The Hangman is feeling like you're in this netherworld, like you're being like this waiting period. And this is, I didn't think about this, but this could even be an extramarital relationship. Maybe you're waiting for somebody else to leave their marriage. And you might feel like you're being strung along by them, and you might be. It's very possible. Somebody may be trying to give you a lot of bull about their relationship. And that does happen. Now, when people tell me things like this about what the other person is saying, a lot of times I'm skeptical of it. But, I don't know. I don't know for sure if that person is lying. But to me, a lot of times the excuses are pretty weak sauce. They're pretty like, oh, well, I'm so concerned about my children and stuff like that, and their children are teenagers. I mean, maybe if their children were young, but there's always like some reason why they can't do it, but they can do everything else. I mean, they can cheat on their partner. That's no problem. They're not concerned about that. They're just concerned about actually having to put their money where their mouth is and leave this unhappy relationship, what they call it. So you may feel like out of control if you're in a situation with somebody else who kind of holds the key of whether or not they're going to leave their relationship. On your end of things, if you're waiting for somebody to commit to you, you may be feeling the same thing, where it's like, I'm just hanging here. I'm just in this state of suspension, and it's like I can't move. I can't, unless I just tell them, bye, bye-bye, and see you later. But if I'm not doing that, what am I going to do? So it's like, the Hangman isn't necessarily always like that. Sometimes it's like desiring to surrender to a situation. And I think surrender is a beautiful thing, because you're not trying to control the situation. But when you do that, you have to know that you're not giving up. You're just allowing the universe to kind of pick up the slack. And you're not trying to force the will of the universe. But, there are occasions where you're in a holding pattern. and you know it deep down inside. You know that you've been waiting way too long for this. And, you know, part of the thing that I think about with the Hangman is this is a card that connects to Neptune and I believe Pisces because of that. And there's always like the sacrificial energy with Neptune and Pisces. But at the same time, there can be self-deception where you believe you're doing something noble, but really what you're doing is you're just kind of allowing yourself to be bamboozled, if you will, by somebody who has their own agenda. Maybe they're having their cake and eating too. And you know that you're also a fixed sign, Scorpio, so you're not impatient. I mean, you know, Scorpio is ruled by Mars as well as Pluto. So I could see sometimes a Scorpio person maybe getting agitated if something doesn't happen when they want it to. But I still think that you're very capable of waiting something out. And, you know, you might be waiting for a lifetime if you don't put a stop to it at some point. But like, let's say you're in a situation where you want the other person to commit to you and they are not willing to do that. This card could suggest that you just enjoy their company and that you don't place any demands on them. Because if you really love somebody, you know, you don't necessarily need to have a certain status in the relationship. I'm not speaking of somebody who is involved with somebody else besides you. I'm talking about if it's just that the person, maybe you've just met, maybe they feel it's too soon to, you know, make it official or what have you. And they're not seeing anybody else, but they still are hesitant to take that next step. If you can just be happy, don't worry and be happy, maybe you can get to that point where they will be willing to do that. Or even if they never decide to, maybe that's enough, because it's not about these outer things. Well, that's me talking, obviously. Maybe to you it has its own symbolism and importance in your life that the person commits to you in a very, what would we say, tangible way. Like, for instance, a marriage certificate, a ring, a ceremony, what have you. Oh, well, let me, I always pick this one next. This is what is crossing you, the Tower. Now, that's an interesting thing in terms of the card that is crossing you. Because the Tower is a card of, like, you know, I was going to say catastrophic change, but it's not really catastrophic. It's just like something has to give and eventually something happens beyond your control. And some people may be afraid of that. Like, you know, so let's look at an example. To me, this card is especially valid for if you are in an extramarital affair. Now, whether you're the one doing the sneaking around, maybe you are the one that's sneaking around, and the Hierophant is talking about your marriage being on your mind, but you're involved in an extramarital affair. Maybe you're afraid of being caught, and so that is creating a lot of tension within you. The Tower to me is like that tension being released, but right now it's kind of in that holding pattern because it hasn't occurred. Now, this almost makes me think that this particular situation is that you're unhappy in a marriage and that you are afraid to just confront the other person about it, and you're just waiting for things to change, or you are, now if the other person is doing the cheating and you know it, but you're kind of tolerating it, very hard for me to believe a Scorpio person would do that, but stranger things have happened. Maybe you have Venus in Sagittarius, and you're a little bit less intense about your concept of relationships. I don't know. But, you know, usually a Scorpio person, that is like their worst nightmare, and they will not stand for it. But whatever is that tower representing, you're afraid of it happening. So maybe if you have gotten involved with somebody that is cheating on their spouse, maybe on a subconscious, I never know if it's unconscious or subconscious level, you're attracted to somebody who isn't fully yours because you're afraid that if you were to get too close to this person, that they could leave, or whatever this represents to you. Maybe you had a trauma growing up. I think a lot of Scorpios have had some kind of issue, especially with death, which is a very sudden thing. So with a parent dying unexpectedly when, you know, you were a child, and the aftermath of that, and that can scar somebody to the point where they do have trust issues. And I always say that Scorpios tend to be very wary of the very thing that they want more than anything, which is getting close to somebody at a soul level. But whether or not they are capable of fully being who they are is a different story, because of that sense of trauma that is experienced when someone leaves your life. You feel abandoned. So anyway, if you're single and you have had a hard time finding a serious love partner, it could be that you've had some kind of betrayal in the past. And with the tower, it would be like, you know, you find out somebody's cheating and you didn't expect it and blah, blah, blah. Now, if you're like dating, maybe you're dating somebody who's a Pisces and a Taurus. I don't know. That would be, if that's true, let me know, because that's always fun. And of course, with just statistical odds, I mean, that might happen anyway, but I always like to assign signs to these cards, and sometimes it's fun when somebody tells me, oh my God, it is these two different people. Now, the higher message is the Hermit. So this is about, now, as I told you, you have all these major arcana cards, 4 out of how many total? I picked 8, right? So that's pretty impressive. Or did I pick 9? 6, 7, 8. No. That's pretty impressive. Half of them are major arcana cards. And the Hermit is connected to Virgo, but in terms of what it represents, I notice in this particular deck they use the star as the inside of the lantern, inside of the light. And, you know, if you think about the star card itself, it points to hope and inspiration in life. But the Hermit realizes that sometimes you can't find something out there. Sometimes you have to go within in order to decide what you're going to do about a particular situation. So the Hermit is looking for that sense of illumination that comes from knowing thyself, and that being the way that you determine what is your next move. And speaking of your next move, we have kind of the practical advice. We have the 9 of Cups, and this is a card of wish fulfillment. So it's like, you know, Jupiter, I think this card may connect to Jupiter, but, you know, sometimes Jupiter is associated with excess and just, you know, Jove or Jupiter, jovial. This can be like a lot of pleasure happening and your wishes coming true, things that you've wanted. Now, interestingly, as I record this, it's the first day of Jupiter in Sagittarius. So this is your second house, Scorpio. And while this is not a, that's going to affect your earned income, and you might see like a good boost to your income. in terms of how it affects you in general, this is Taurus's house. So again, with the Hierophant, it might be talking about this relationship with the Taurus person, which is your opposite sign, that feels like you've hit the jackpot, like something very good. It is, with Cups, we're talking about feelings, but even with the Nine of Cups, and I think the Ten of Cups too, but especially with the Nine of Cups, there can be material, something materially beneficial too. So if you have met somebody or you're with someone who is financially stable, or they are well-to-do, and so that has benefited your life on that level as well. This can be just feeling like you are fulfilled, and maybe in the past you felt empty. So it's possible that this Hierophant card isn't something that you are experiencing as you go into the month of November. Maybe this is something that comes in for you during the month. And speaking of what is coming in the near future, we have the Ace of Swords. This is a card of cutting through illusion and seeing things as they really are. So going back to the scenario, if you're involved with somebody, and whether you're the one who is waiting for somebody else, or somebody else is, or you are with a partner, but you're not happy and you're with someone outside of the primary relationship, the Ace of Swords can get you to see more clearly about it. Because even if you feel, I don't know, like you're justified, if you're the one that is stepping out on a marriage, you may feel justified because you haven't been respected. The other person may not be even trying to please you, and you may have gotten involved with somebody very unexpectedly because they really showed you concern and they seemed to care about you. And so maybe it was hard for you, maybe it's been hard for you to accept that you're doing this kind of thing, but you feel like you may even feel like you had little choice because of the way you were being treated at home. Well, the Ace of Swords would be kind of saying, yeah, but maybe I could have handled it this way. Maybe I didn't do the right thing. Because the Tower card can be like a lot of resentments that have been building up that you have not shared with a partner. And I think that is many times what happens when relationships just kind of like something explodes and then they just like break up, that one or both parties never really expressed something that upset them, and then they kind of held it within themselves. I'm hoping that that's not going to be, okay, good, that was a school bus. I was afraid. They've been doing a lot of leaf blowing today because of the autumn. So yeah, so also if you're somebody who is waiting for somebody to to propose to you or something along those lines, you may have a moment of clarity where you say, you know something, I think they are stringing me along. And it may not be because they're cheating on you or anything like that. It may be because they can't commit. They're afraid to commit, or they're waiting for something that they're waiting for the perfect relationship. And it doesn't mean that they don't think that you're good enough. It may be that they have an unrealistic expectation of what relationships are supposed to be. So it's very, very important that you not take somebody else's lack of willingness to commit or, a similar emotion as having anything to do with your worth as a person. Because that can actually make you more likely to cling to the relationship because it triggers insecurity within yourself. what's great about this Ace of Swords is that you're ready to start something new. And you're seeing things as they really are for a change. Because one of the reasons I picked an additional card, this is the outcome card, the Seven of Cups, there still can be confusion. You may be aware enough to maybe put an end to a relationship that you feel is keeping you hanging on. But it can be a situation where even if you were to do that, then you're like, now what? Now what do I do? Because you may be in high demand. With the Seven of Cups, you may be getting people asking you out, and you're kind of like, I don't know what to do, you know? Should I go with this person or that person? And so I did pick an additional card, because sometimes the Seven of Cups can be confusion, so many choices. And the Queen of Swords. The Queen of Swords is very important for a Scorpio, because you're water, and swords can be more of the intellect. So it's like putting your head above your heart. And that's not something, I'm not saying that in a bad way, that your heart is bad, but it can keep you holding on to a relationship that doesn't serve you, or it can keep you in a situation where maybe you even have pity for somebody. It might not even be that you're really in love with them. I think with the Nine of Cups and the Seven of Cups, that your world is opening up for some reason, Scorpio, in terms of love. And you have more options, and you realize that. And maybe people are noticing you. And you realize that you're kind of sitting around twiddling your thumbs waiting for somebody, and meanwhile you have all this other action going on, the potential partners. So with the Queen of Swords, it's really like not allowing your heart to mess with your discernment, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to enjoy making that choice. You know, you may be like, okay, it's like having the world be your oyster, and you have a lot of options. So what I'm going to do now is pick one of these Whispers of Love cards. This is I like to show the back. Isn't that beautiful? And what I like about this is that, you know, it looks like a matte finish, but it's very sturdy, which is always nice when you get these cards. They're kind of, you know, they're larger than my tarot cards, but that's par for the course when it comes to these oracle cards. So I just shuffled it, and this is the one I'm picking. And practice compassion. See things from a different perspective. And I love the illustrations. They're so beautiful. So these cards are for love, but of course there are different types of love, aren't there, Scorpio? What I would say about this card is I think that sometimes we get so caught up in what we want that we forget that the other person has their own reasons for doing what they're doing. If you're a person who is looking for love, maybe you need to forgive somebody. Maybe there's somebody here, and maybe it was even when you were a child, somebody abandoned the family, or something that you couldn't control, and you may feel resentment to this day over that person's decision, but you don't really know what was going on within themselves. And really, when you practice compassion and you realize that people are just trying to be happy, and sometimes they do things that hurt others in that quest to be happy, but when you have the generosity of spirit to realize that, because I really think that's true, even if you tell me the worst case scenario, these people are very deluded if they think that hurting others can bring them happiness, but sometimes people feel like they have no choice. And so the more that we can think the best of others, the more that we let ourselves off the hook too, I think, when we mess up in relationships or other areas of life. And that allows for more self-love, because if you can't forgive yourself, obviously you don't have love for yourself either. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there, Scorpio. And I wish you happy holidays, whether you celebrate them or not. You know, it's still a time where you can appreciate what you have and hope for the best in the new year. And yeah, so I wish that for you. If you'd like a personal reading, the link to my website is below. Have a great December. Bye.